Jade wants to die on purpose. Not because he's given up, not because he's broken, but because he genuinely believes that experiencing death is the only way to change what's coming. And Boyd, who has watched more people die in this town than almost anyone, is furious about it. That tension alone would be enough to make episode 6 one of the most important episodes of the season. But here's the thing. That's not even close to the most disturbing part of what's happening right now. Because while everyone is focused on Jade's plan, something much darker is already quietly building underneath the surface. The same pattern that destroyed previous cycles, the one where the survivors didn't get killed by monsters, they got killed by each other, is starting to take shape again. And the most terrifying part is that nobody in town seems to notice it happening. But we do. So let's break down everything going on in episode 6. What it means for Jade, what it means for Victor, and why the cycle repeating itself right now might actually be the biggest clue this show has ever given us. Episode 5 ended in a way that genuinely shifted something. Not just in terms of plot, but in terms of what this show is actually about at its core. For 3 seasons, the central fear in From was always external. The monsters, the forest, the rules nobody fully understood. The town itself felt like the enemy, something ancient and malevolent pressing in on the survivors from the outside. But what Jade's vision during the mushroom trip revealed completely flipped that. Because the real horror wasn't out there in the dark. It was inside the town walls. It was the people themselves. The survivors of a previous cycle, people who had gone through exactly what Jade and the others are going through right now, had turned on him. They blamed him. And when Jade desperately asked about Tabitha, the answer was worse. Whatever happened to her, whatever the townspeople did or allowed to happen, it was even more disturbing than what they did to Jade. That single reveal recontextualized everything. Every moment of community, every act of protection, every alliance formed inside that town now carries the shadow of what it could eventually become. And episode 6 is walking directly into that shadow. Let's start with Jade because the entire episode seems to be built around him and the consequences of what he now knows. Coming out of that mushroom trip, Jade isn't confused or traumatized in the way you'd expect someone to be after seeing their own death. He's focused, almost frighteningly so. He has arrived at a conclusion that most people would never allow themselves to reach, which is that the answer to understanding the cycle and potentially breaking it might require him to actually experience dying. Not metaphorically, not in a vision, for real. He wants to die, be brought back, and see what knowledge or memory surfaces on the other side. It's the most extreme idea anyone in that town has ever seriously proposed, and it tells you everything about how desperate and how determined Jade has become. He isn't someone who makes this kind of decision lightly. He's been absorbing fragments of his past lives, piecing together a picture that nobody else can fully see, and he's decided that the incomplete version of that picture isn't enough anymore. He needs the full thing. Even if getting it means crossing the line between life and death, Boyd's reaction to this plan is visceral and completely understandable. Boyd has been the backbone of survival in that town for longer than most. He's made impossible choices, he's watched people die for reasons that felt arbitrary and cruel, and he's carried the weight of leadership in a place where leadership means constantly managing the line between hope and despair. When Boyd hears that Jade wants to intentionally experience death, his response isn't just concern. It's anger, because Boyd knows better than almost anyone what death in that town really looks like. He's seen it up close too many times. He knows that plans like this, plans built on the idea that you can control something as unpredictable as dying and coming back, are exactly the kind of plans that get people killed permanently. And Boyd doesn't have the luxury of losing Jade right now. None of them do. Jade is carrying knowledge that nobody else has access to, fragments of previous cycles stored somewhere inside him, and if he dies and doesn't come back, or comes back wrong, that knowledge is gone forever. So Boyd's refusal isn't just emotional, it's strategic, it's protective. But Jade isn't listening, and that conflict is going to drive some of the most intense moments of this episode. Now here's where the trailer becomes really interesting. We see Boyd performing CPR on someone. Tabitha is visible in the background, looking absolutely terrified. And the natural assumption, given everything going on with Jade's plan, is that the person Boyd is trying to save is Jade, that Jade went through with it, that he pushed Boyd past his limit and did it anyway. But I want to hold that assumption loosely, because episode 5 gave us something that a lot of people might have underweighted in the moment. Donna told Tabitha something that felt almost like a quiet foreshadowing. She told Tabitha that she would put her own life at risk so that Tabitha's children wouldn't lose their mother. That kind of statement in a show like From doesn't exist just to develop character. It exists to plant a seed. Donna is someone who is deeply protective of the people she cares about. And if a situation arose where Tabitha was in danger, Donna is exactly the kind of person who would throw herself in front of it without a second thought. So is the person getting CPR Jade? Maybe, my instinct says yes. But don't sleep on Donna. This show has a history of making you look one direction while the real hit comes from somewhere else entirely. Let's talk about Victor. Because as much as episode 6 is centered on Jade, what's happening with Victor runs underneath everything, like a current you can feel but can't quite see. Victor has been in that town longer than anyone. He grew up there. He watched people die. He survived a massacre. He buried every memory he could find just so he could keep functioning, just so the weight of knowing everything he knows didn't completely destroy him. And for a while that worked. He found a kind of quiet existence inside the trauma. He learned to move through the town without letting all of it touch him at once. But now his father has discovered what Victor has been carrying. The truth about Miranda. The truth about the man in yellow. The layers of what Victor witnessed and understood and then deliberately buried are starting to come back to the surface. And the rooftop image from the trailer, Victor standing alone up there, completely isolated against the sky, is one of the most quietly devastating images this season has produced. Because Victor isn't standing there dramatically. He's standing there the way someone stands when they have run out of places to go. When the walls close in not physically, but emotionally, and there is simply nowhere left to retreat to, Victor's knowledge about the man in yellow is something episode 6 might finally start to crack open. We've been getting fragments all season, glimpses, suggestions, but Victor has always been the locked door that nobody has the full key to. His memories aren't just personal. They're historical. They're archaeological. They contain information about cycles that happened before any of the current survivors arrived in town, and the man in yellow is at the center of that history in a way nobody has fully mapped yet. What does Victor actually know? Not just about who the man in yellow is, but about what he wants. About what role he plays in the repeating structure of the town's cycles. Episode 6 feels like it's finally going to force some of that out into the open. Whether Victor gives it willingly, or whether circumstances pull it out of him, something is going to shift in what we understand about the man in yellow before this episode ends. Now I want to go back to something that I think is the most conceptually fascinating thread running through everything right now, which is this idea that Tabitha and Jade are living the same cycle they already lived, but in completely different bodies. In previous cycles, they existed as Miranda and Christopher. Victor knew them in those forms. He was alive when they were there. He watched what happened to them. And now here they are again, carrying fragments of those past selves in their current bodies, beginning to remember things they technically have no reason to remember, beginning to connect to a history that predates their arrival in town entirely. Think about what that actually means. It means the cycle didn't reset completely. Something carried over. Something of Miranda lives in Tabitha, and something of Christopher lives in Jade, and the town seems to know it even if the people around them don't fully recognize it yet. The settlement residents are already uncomfortable. They notice when Tabitha says something strange. They notice when she knows something she shouldn't know. And that discomfort, that low-level suspicion, is exactly how it started in previous cycles. This is the part that genuinely unsettles me the most when I think about it carefully. Because we already know the end point. We already know that in a previous cycle, the people of the town turned on Jade. They didn't just exclude him or distrust him. They killed him. And whatever happened to Tabitha was apparently even worse. So watching the current cycle slowly recreate the conditions for that same outcome, watching the suspicion begin to form around these two people who are trying their hardest to help, is like watching a car crash in slow motion when you know you can't stop it. The tragedy isn't in the monsters. The tragedy is in the humans. The town doesn't just trap people physically. It traps them psychologically. It applies pressure until the cracks in human nature start to spread. Until fear becomes suspicion, and suspicion becomes accusation, and accusation becomes violence. And the cycle doesn't need monsters to complete itself. It just needs people to forget who they are. Jade is currently surrounded by the people we trust most. Boyd, Kenny, Tabitha. The inner circle. The people who have proven themselves in this town over and over again. But trust in From is never static. It shifts, it erodes. And as Jade's knowledge becomes more visible, as his visions and his memories and his theories start to circulate beyond that inner circle, the question becomes what happens when people who don't have context for any of this start to hear about it? What happens when someone in town who is already frightened and already looking for something to blame hears that Jade experienced visions of past lives? That he's been remembering things from cycles that happened before he arrived? In a town where fear is the dominant emotional weather, that kind of information doesn't stay neutral for long. It becomes a story. And the story that fear tells about someone like Jade is never charitable. Here's something I keep coming back to. Victor is still alive. He has survived every cycle. He was there when Miranda and Christopher were there, and he is here now when Tabitha and Jade are here. That continuity is not accidental. The show has been very deliberate about Victor's survival, and I think it matters more than we've been giving it credit for. Because if the cycle repeats, and Victor is the only constant across those repetitions, then Victor's continued existence means something structural about how the cycle operates. He is the thread that connects every version of this story. And the fact that he's still here, that he hasn't been consumed by the cycle the way everyone else has, suggests that his survival is either the thing that could break the pattern or the thing that ensures the pattern continues. I genuinely don't know which one yet, but I think episode 6 is going to push us closer to finding out. The title of this episode, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, is doing real thematic work, and it's worth sitting with it for a moment. Carson McCullers wrote that novel about people who are desperately trying to connect with each other, but find themselves fundamentally unable to bridge the distance between themselves and everyone around them. They reach out, they try. But the loneliness persists not because they stop trying, but because something in the structure of their situation makes genuine connection nearly impossible. Drop that theme into From, and it fits almost too perfectly. These people live together. They eat together, they fight together, they mourn together. And yet every one of them is becoming more isolated with each passing episode. Jade is isolated by his visions. Victor is isolated by his memories. Tabitha is isolated by what she's beginning to remember. Boyd is isolated by his refusal to accept that some things might be beyond his ability to control. They are all reaching for each other and finding that the reaching keeps falling short. And the town seems designed, deliberately or not, to keep making that gap wider. The settlement adds another layer to this because the synopsis tells us that deeply troubling news from the settlement makes its way back to town. We don't know exactly what that news is, but given everything that's already unstable, the timing couldn't be worse. The settlement has been functioning as a kind of fragile hope, an experiment in whether survival beyond the town's immediate boundaries is possible. If something has gone wrong out there, if the settlement is in danger or has suffered some kind of loss, that news doesn't arrive in a vacuum. It arrives into a community that is already stretched, already fearful, already beginning to fracture along the exact fault lines that previous cycles fractured along. Bad news at the wrong moment doesn't just inform people, it destabilizes them. And destabilized people in From have a very specific history of making decisions that become permanent. What I think episode 6 is really building toward is a moment of irreversibility. Every season has one. A point where something happens that cannot be undone, that changes the shape of everything that comes after. And the pieces are all in position for it right now. Jade's plan to experience death, Boyd's